This is a piece of the desert. So many things happen to the people of God in the desert that we just have to have part of the desert in our classroom. Now we could not have the entire desert, so we just have a part of the desert here in the room. The desert is a wonderful and strange place. There's not a lot of water in the desert, so you don't grow a lot of food, and people die when they don't get to eat. The wind's always blowing in the desert, and when the wind blows, the desert changes, and it's easy to get lost. Some people live in the desert, and other people only go there when they have to. It takes a lot of courage to be in the desert. The people of God lived in a place where there was no rain. And because there was no rain, they could not grow their crops. And there was no grain to grind to make their bread. And everyone was hungry. And the children cried in their bed. So their mothers and fathers decided that they had to go to a place where there would be food. And even if they had to go into the desert, they would go. So they went to a new place, and they began their journey across the desert. It was a very hard journey. But they continued on. They made their way across the desert to a land called Egypt. They knew that they would have food in Egypt. And finally, they were there. And they had food. The king's name in Egypt was Pharaoh. And the people, after they lived there, had to begin doing what Pharaoh told them to do. They were trapped, and they could not go home again. They had to do everything Pharaoh said. They had to eat when Pharaoh said eat. They had to go to bed When Pharaoh said go to bed, they had to wake up. When Pharaoh said wake up, they were slaves. One of these persons' name was Moses. And Moses went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh said, "No." Moses went to Pharaoh again and said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh said, "No." Many times Moses went to Pharaoh, and then many things began to happen to the people of Egypt. And each time Moses would go to Pharaoh, Pharaoh would tell Moses no. Then something very terrible happened. All of the firstborn boys in all the families of Egypt died, even the boys in Pharaoh's family. But the oldest boy in the families of the people of God did not die, because the people put a sign above their door, "From the blood of the Lamb," and the death angel passed over them. Again, Moses went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh said, "Yes." The people of God began to hurry. They wanted to leave before Pharaoh changed his mind. So they gathered all of their things and began to gather to leave Egypt. They even made bread. Now, it's not the kind of bread you buy in a store, because they did not put any leaven in the bread. It didn't have time to rise because they were in a hurry. It's a flat bread called matzah. You can eat this bread even today, and when you taste it, you could taste this story. They hurried as fast as they could out of Egypt. They were afraid Pharaoh would change his mind. And then they heard the sound they did not want to hear. They heard the hoofs of horses and the wheels of chariots, and the ground shook like thunder. And they knew Pharaoh was after them. Pharaoh chased them all the way to the edge of the water. Now, they heard Pharaoh coming, and they were pushed right against the edge. And then Moses came so close to God, and God came so close to Moses that Moses knew a way through the water. And the people began to cross to the other side. This one maybe was scared crossing the water. This one ran as fast as they could. This one was happy to be crossing to the other side. This one was confused. And finally, they made it to the other side. The water's closed. And Pharaoh could not get to them. They were free. And they were so glad to be free that they had to dance. And Miriam led the dancing. I wonder what part of this story you liked best. I wonder what part of this story is most important. I wonder what part of this story is about you, or who you might be in this story. I wonder if there's any part of this story that we can leave out and still have all we need.